Woohoo! We are live!
Hello,
Hello,
listeners.
everybody. We are here today to talk about Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. Off to a great start. So we're gonna go through and do our customary rating of said book, and I am going to start on the opposite end of the line here, and we'll start with Emma. What did you think out of 5?
I actually hadn't thought about this. Well, I'm sure I rated it on Goodreads. I don't remember. I think
gave it 4 on Goodreads.
Yeah, I think I gave it 4, which I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna say 4 stars. Like, I think the writing is good, and I like a lot of things about it, but I also think it could have been stronger in a lot of ways.
And Megan.
I've been really excited for this chat because the first book club of the year, everyone liked the book and I hated it. And it felt like for this one, everyone was kind of meh about the book, but I loved it. So it was like a 4.5 star for me. It wasn't that I didn't notice when there were things that I was like, oh, well, this doesn't make sense. But then like I had the me to me thing happening where I was like, shut up, I'm reading. I gotta know what happens. So I'm excited. I think there's gonna be a lot to talk about tonight.
Awesome. And Rachel?
I will also give it a 4 out of 5. I think it was overhyped for me a bit. So I definitely overhyped it for myself. I did like it. I thought it was really cool, like really neat world. I liked what happened. I did think it could have been stronger. I think things could have been like a little bit more, I don't know, explained maybe in some circumstances. But overall, I thought it was really good. Also, if I'm looking down this entire chat, it's because I'm embroidering at the same time. So we just talked about.
She's not disinterested.
I'm not. It's not that I don't care about you. It's just that I'm focusing really hard on trying to get these threads through the eye of a needle.
She's embroidering beautiful swear words.
Yes, I've decided that. Well, I haven't. I picked up cross stitch like at the beginning of the year, and then kind of forgot about it. And I want to try my hand at embroidering sassy embroideries. So they're just going to be swear words with beautiful florals around them.
I love that. Like, I don't know why. I love it so much.
I also just lost my sewing needle in my sweatpants, so
that's dangerous.
That's going to leave us. That's going to be a fun surprise for later. Oh, there it is. Okay, thank God.
Dangerous. That sounds terrible.
Oh man.
Okay, so I'm gonna be the Simon Cowell of this group this time, and say 3 out of 5. And I also think it's because it was like super hyped for me. I was following the whole thing on Pitch Wars when the pitch first went up, and I was really excited by the description. So I think it like not only in my mind built it up, but then also it was super hyped, right? Like even if you look at Goodreads, it's like 5 stars and flailing, and I liked it, but I think I was expecting like a lot from it, which isn't necessarily fair. But there was a lot that did fall flat for me because I've been reading like fantasy and high fantasy for so long that it really felt like a lot of tropes to me, albeit in a completely different, like West African mythology is very different than anything I've ever read. So that definitely saved some of it, which we'll go into more. But I'm going to say 3 just because of the amount of tropes. And Megan's making faces. This is going to be a good discussion.
I'm so excited because literally last night I was like, this is every trope ever, and I am here for it.
And you love it.
I know exactly what's going to happen, but I need to know.
Yeah, I love tropes, and a lot of times I like when tropes are in things, but I don't know. I guess maybe I felt like it maybe wasn't like done originally enough or something. I don't know. It just felt like very generic. Like the plot felt very generic. So I didn't mind some of the tropes, but just like the plot was kind of like predictable and generic, which I didn't love. I was talking to another one of my like bookie friends who was also kind of saying that same thing, where it wasn't anything new, but because it was a West African folklore, like that's what made it so exciting important. And important because there hasn't really been stories from that perspective before. So I get why they're like hyping it to the sky, because it's new in a way, but this plot is pretty normal. I can already name like 3 books off the top of my head that
things to the place.
Yeah, magic, girl from small town, etc.
I think you're gonna get that with these types of fantasies. I mean, regardless to a certain level, with almost every new, I would call this high fantasy. Do you guys think?
Yeah.
I think you're going to get that with, and especially for people that maybe saw the hype and weren't living in this high fantasy bubble like a lot of us were, it would probably seem completely new to them. Like if you mostly read paranormal or mostly contemporary even, and you read this and it's like, oh, these aren't necessarily tropes to you at that point. But if you grow up reading it, then you're like, oh yes, I've seen this story before. But let's talk about your favorite and least favorite characters and why. Emma,
oh gosh,
did you have a favorite?
Out of the POV characters, probably Amari. Outside of that, I liked Zoo, that like young girl, the one that found the scroll initially. I liked her a lot. Like I feel like there was nobody that I like really, really loved. Like I enjoyed Amari a lot, and I liked her character development definitely the best. And I liked the perspective she came from and everything. But there was nobody that I was like, I totally love and stan this character. But yeah, so probably the two of them would probably be my favorites. Least favorite, like probably like Zaylee or Zelly. I don't know how to pronounce her name.
Zelly, I think.
Yeah,
That's how I was going to pronounce that.
I don't know. I kind of felt like she didn't really have any development. Like she was kind of the same person at the end that she was at the beginning. I don't know. Like I just a lot of times like her POV chapters, I was like, I'm ready to get to somebody else. There was no, like I said, there was no character that I like really, really loved. But there also was like no characters that I really, really hated. So.
Megan?
Mine are gonna be the same. My favorite was Amari. Every time she was on the page, it's like I gotta know what this girl's gonna do. And Zelly was my least favorite. I know it was on purpose, like the hypocrisy that she had, feeling like the Kings was a murderer and he killed these people while simultaneously trying to kill Amari when she first meets her. But she's like, I'm a better person. But it felt like she never got over that. And so and it could just be like a series arc thing. But I would have liked to see at least the realization a little more strongly that she had this hypocrisy about her. I loved her like realization of the darkness in her, but there was never a moment of like, I've tried to kill people too. I don't care about killing people, because like she never thought twice about it. But
And Rachel?
It's that thing. I didn't like love anybody. I think I did really like Amari, but I didn't hate anybody either. They were all just kind of in the middle. I think of course I can't remember his name. The Prince character. Sorry, it's been a little while since I read this. I liked him. I think he had a lot of potential. I especially liked the fact that at the very beginning he's very anti-magic, and I think that could have been really, really good. Like I did like their like forbidden romance thing, but I wish he had almost been a little bit more of a villain. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm going to echo that a little bit. Like everyone else, my favorite character was Amari. And it's funny because I always kind of troll YouTube, not YouTube, sorry, Goodreads reviews. I'm always curious what other people, what their favorite characters are. And Amari is definitely, I feel like, a lot of people's favorites. And I think it's because she had such a good character arc. I really enjoyed being in her POV, and she had so much development. And I wanted to read more of her. I always, like Megan, I'm like, I want to know more. I want to be in her head again. And same when we were in Zelly's POV, I was like, don't care. Let's go back to Amari. And also, I'm going to agree with Rachel, the Prince. I didn't love Anan. I think it's because I did want him to be a solid villain. I didn't love the romance. I felt like it was insta-lovey and then ended up being very confusing for me in the end. I think part of it was the pacing. I think because everything happened so fast. I had a lot of problems with the pacing in general in this book, I think, and it affected the way I felt definitely about the romance, and then definitely about that character in general, because he goes up and down so much. Like he hates magic, and then he is magic, and then he's okay with it, and then he is in love with her.
And then he loves it.
And then he hates it again.
And it's very confusing. confusing, and it could have been done in a way that was good. I think if she'd stretched it out over a couple of books, in particular, because you know me, I friggin' love the trope like enemies to lovers. I
Same.
love it. I love it. But I don't think it was done in a way that it worked with the pacing, because it happened all too fast. If it had been stretched out over 2 books, I would have probably loved it.
I
think if they had, instead of him transitioning so quickly into like, I love Zelly, so I love magic now. If it had been like, well, I kind of like her, so maybe I want to be along with it. And then once he's back with his dad, if it had like really highlighted the abusive relationship, I think that for me would have really solidified the arc. Because like it would make sense that once he's back with his abuser that he would regress. But the very intense rubber banding definitely felt a little whiplashy.
I agree. Like, I really liked the potential of his character and like the potential of the romance. I like the idea because I love enemies to lovers, and I love the idea of like him like hating magic and then like growing to love her and then maybe realizing magic isn't so bad. You know, like I really liked that, but it just was not executed well. It was very insta-lovey for sure. And then it really bothered me that like I felt like him deciding to hate magic again like could have maybe been done, but the reasoning didn't make sense. Like he was like these magi's or magi or whatever, like they killed a bunch of the evil king's guards to rescue Zelly. So they're terrible. Like he's like he's evil, obviously. Like literally he used that to decide that Zelly is going to lead all of the magi to kill everyone who doesn't have magic. He literally said Zelly's gonna kill everyone. And I was like, what?
There was a part in there where he was like, they showed up for no reason and started killing us in our castle. And I was like, you are a captain, like you should understand moves and counter moves. Like your people attacked first.
Yeah, and they helped you
and took something from them.
Yeah. And he was like trying to save her too, and like gave her to them. It just didn't make sense, especially the whole like she's gonna lead a magi army to kill all of the non-magic people. And I was like,
wait.
Yeah. I'm like, someone doesn't have all the information.
Yeah.
And that seems like something that if it was spread out more, like the next book is called Children of Virtue and Vengeance, I think, which makes me think that like if that part had been spread out, it would make more sense. My guess is that at the end of that one, Zelly is going to look like someone who would maybe kill all of the royals.
It just, all these titles, I just think of
I don't love that title, to be honest.
It makes me think of, where is it, the Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. That's all I can think of.
It's pulled from
the text,
the book itself.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It says, "We are all children of blood and bone, all instruments of vengeance and virtue."
Okay, I get it. That's fair.
Fair.
And I cannot say literally anything because my book is Witches of Ash and Ruin, so like it's not my mouth.
No, I love that like title of noun and noun. Like I really like that.
Yeah. Here I am, like, oh, those
are the worst. Yeah.
Those are the worst.
No, I love those titles. I'm just like it's too similar to the other one, to that it just makes me think of it. But speaking of which, we're not going to be talking about the little conspiracy that's happening. But I just want to point out that the virtue venue thingamaverb, that's just what I'm thinking about.
The thingamaverb. Yeah, I mean, on the subject of titles, that's a really good disclaimer. There was some Twitter drama, and we are just here to talk about books, the book, I should say. So we will not be addressing that at all. Megan's over here with her happy.
My library book.
Yeah.
Black out my library on the front.
Like, can we also just talk about this cover? Because regardless of what I thought about like my rating, this is probably the most gorgeous cover it's constantly facing out on my shelf. Because it's the most gorgeous cover I have probably on my shelf. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Super lovely.
We've got some people in the comments sharing. It looks like we've got probably like the most broad set of feels about a book that we've had all year. We've got some people who loved it, some people who were not as big of fans. And Griswold said, I like Amari and Mama Agba. Don't care too much for the prince. Let's see.
Something that I wish had been explained, and like maybe this will come up in a later book, but I feel like should have somehow been addressed in this one, is I was always like really confused about the Magi who killed the king's first family. Because like I kept expecting there to be some sort of reveal that like there was more to that story than like we had been told. Because like basically like we found out that like the king and his father were trying to like bring the Magi into the government, like have them as part of the council and all this stuff. And I was like, that's cool. And then the Magi came and killed his family. And so I'm like, was there a reason for them? Like, I don't know. I kept expecting it to be like, oh, like the king's lying about this story or something. But it was just like, yeah, they just killed them. And I was like, is this never going to be addressed? Like,
yeah, I think at one point they were like, oh, well, those were just an offshoot group.
Yeah. I'm like, but why did they do it if they were trying to integrate the Magi into the government? Like, I don't
That's that's true. Yeah.
know. Come up. I don't know. I was expecting there to be some sort of like reveal there, and there wasn't. So
another thing I noted when I was reading is I really would have liked a better explanation of how the magic system works.
Yeah.
Like
agreed.
the blood magic in particular. But like I also know you can only fit so much in a novel, and you
But
also
that's a major point of the novel is
yeah.
gods and magic.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But like you also are establishing an entirely new world at the start of a series and that. But yeah, I would have liked to have gone a little bit deeper into that to get like a more solid grasp on how exactly the magic works in this world.
Yeah, there's a couple times I remember reading it where I was very confused and being like, okay, so what god is this? What are they doing again? Like, how does this come into it? And like, oh, now we're doing blood magic, and it just something didn't, you know, at least in my head, like it didn't explain itself well enough.
Yeah, for me, I
And there's
generally
an awful lot of deities.
I wasn't confused about the gods at all. Like I had no issue with that. There was like a guide at the front that had like all the gods and what magic went with them. And there was like the scene where they looked at the mural. So I like felt like I understood the gods. But it was like how magic works that I didn't always really. I think part of that's because like Zelly doesn't have anyone there teaching her like anything about magic. She's just using it. So you're like, okay.
Which I think I kind of like in a way. It's so funny.
It's unique.
Yes, it is unique, and it's also I wouldn't want the opposite where you know that mentor comes and he's like, "Let me explain to you, child, about these systems of magic," and he lets me pages to like tell you things, right? Because that sucks too. And who was the guy she met at the temple?
Was it Lacan?
Yeah, I think so. I almost expected him to be that type of figure. And he like explains a little bit, I think, but he doesn't turn out to be.
Yeah, he gives them the history and sets Zelly up with the connection she needs.
But he doesn't get the chance really to turn into that.
Yeah.
Really mentor.
I liked more development of the magic system. I almost think that it didn't really need it too much because it felt very familiar as a magic system. Like there's these different gods, each one represents a different kind of magic, and like different people have different kinds of magic. And I'm like, I've seen this enough times that I like get the general like gist of how it works. So I didn't feel, as much as I would have liked more, I didn't feel like I really like had to have it.
I was mostly curious about the price of using magic because it was my understanding that the blood magic was very dangerous, but I never felt like Zelly had serious consequences for using it.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that other guy just straight up exploded the one time he used blood magic. And, like Zelly did die at the end, but she was only dead like 5 minutes.
She wasn't
before
bad.
her own mom is like, okay, no consequences for you. Head on back.
That's true.
My mother used blood magic in the past, and like she was tired, but she was fine. So I was really confused about the guy like blowing up. I was like, what?
Maybe it's like
he's not strong enough. I don't know.
Yeah, because she did have that connection.
Yeah, if you're like
magic like
you're down with the death goddess, and like, you know, maybe she's a little forgiving.
That's fair.
Yeah, my favorite was when Zelly is talking to Inan, trying to convince him that his magic is okay, and she's like, "I can teach you how to control it," and they're like, "Let's just go to this other room," and I was like, "What are you going to teach him? You don't know anything." You guys are
Well,
just
that's
going
like
to
what
make out. Come on.
Ooh, I could
Oh,
teach
Moira.
you. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of what happens at the end. Like, she doesn't know what she's doing, and then she like turns on magic 200%, and then like, whoopsies.
Yeah.
Okay,
see,
so that ending. Do you guys think
You wanna
this
talk
means
about the
that she
ending?
gave magic to everyone?
Yes.
From the
Okay.
Or at least I'm under the impression that everybody that could have magic now has
I
magic.
read the synopsis of the second book, and it says that like all of the diviners have gotten their magic, and then like some members of like the nobility who have some like magic ancestry have gotten magic. So
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was under the
it's
impression
like
of.
some of the like Kosidan people, I guess, have gotten magic.
Mhm.
I'm mostly curious because Amari was all over that scroll. So like,
I guess once it was like really activated, that's when like more people got it.
But Amari got magic, didn't she?
At the end,
yeah,
but not
at
from
the end.
Not from
Oh, okay. Okay, right. Yeah. Like I said, it's been such a long time since I read that.
I
this
know.
book. I'm like trying to refresh myself, but
I did actually like that idea that like, oh, you didn't do the ritual, like you messed up, and now like you had that one chance and you blew it, and like I actually really liked that idea because that's pretty different than anything you've ever read. 'cause
that's
it's always
very
just
true.
like,
Yeah,
last
she
second, everything
destroys
works
the scroll. I was
yeah, and then she's
"What?
like,
What?"
oh crap. And like that
Yeah.
was realistic. I liked that.
Very
Mhm.
true. Actually, that's one thing because one of the reasons I gave it 3 stars was because I had to force myself through I think it was the second half particularly that I was like, okay, keep turning pages and get to the end. And then you get to a certain point at the end where I was like, oh my God, and glued to it.
Yeah.
And that was I was the same with the scrolls destroy. I was like, what? Because that doesn't happen usually
Yeah, right?
it's not a high fantasy trope. Like normally the hero is like, woohoo, everything's fine.
They're like
Yeah.
almost dead and they slam the scroll against the
Yeah.
thing at the last minute or
exactly.
something.
We're
Yeah.
fine. And
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, I think she did a really good job of wrapping it up and kind of like everything exploding in your face at the end and that being unexpected. So
It's funny that like you had trouble with the second half because I had trouble with like the beginning of the book. Like a lot of things really bothered me in the beginning from like a storytelling perspective. I think it's like very much one of those things that like 10 years ago when I wasn't really writing, it wouldn't have bothered me. But like as a writer, I was like, no. I felt like the characters were very much, except for Amari, and this goes back to like Amari being like the greatest character. But I feel like everybody else was like pushed into like their path. Like it felt like the author was like pushing them instead of the decision.
Go. It's funny because I didn't actually mind the pushing, and I'm probably guilty of this as an author as well. But again, Amari was amazing. But I think what kept me hooked into the beginning is because it is West Africa. It is a different setting. It is something I've never read before with that mythology, right? And to me, as I'm reading it, I'm going, I can see this in my head. Like the setting pulled me in so hard that I think it kept me going until and then I did hit that point where I was like, oh, this is like, I have to keep going through this.
Pulled me in more in the second
Yeah.
half. But like,
interesting.
in the beginning, like it was very much like, I just didn't get the whole, like, they have no money. And so like Zelly's plan is like, let me take this one little packet of fish and go all the way to the big city to sell it. And that's going to like save us. And I'm like, then why haven't you been selling your fish there this whole time? If it's going to make that much, she was like, this is going to make so much money. And I was like, and then it's only like a 3-hour ride too. Like it's not even like a long journey they had to go on. It was like 3 hours. And so I was like, why don't you just go here all the time?
I thought the fish was like really hard to get.
It's like a rare fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, if it makes you so much money, why aren't you, and it's only a 3-hour trip, why aren't you doing this more often, I guess is like what
Even with the less rare fish.
And like,
I mean, 3 hours in the sun
Like,
with
oh
a
my
fish
God,
is probably not going to be the greatest.
tells the guard her name and what city she's from, and the guard is like, "Ooh, you're a long way from home." And I was like, "Not really. You're gonna make it there, sell it, and get back like in a day, in less than a day." So that like kind of like it felt like very like we have to give her this reason to go to the city kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like that finally at the end, because another thing that really bothered me at the beginning was Amari just like randomly asking her for help. And then it's like finally like at the very end of the book you find out it's because she has like the same color eyes as her friend, like Binta or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, but like you don't find that out until the very end of the book. So the whole time I was like, why did she just grab this random like 6 and be like, help me get out of here? Like
I
even later, but at the beginning it bothered me because it seemed like it was just to put them together.
Yeah. Is it? They sold the movie rights, right? It's going to be a movie.
They've sold the rights. I don't think they've like cast anyone or anything, but Fox owns the rights.
Okay. They have to make it, right? Like it would be stupid not to. The book's been so popular.
Yeah, it's so popular, and it's got like every perfect trope to make a blockbuster movie.
That's
But,
true.
like, seriously, as much as I complained about like some of the slower stuff in the middle, I'm just like sitting here going, I will like punch people out of my way to get tickets to this movie because it's going to be so epic. Like just
It's like Black Panther meets Star Wars, like characters in Star Wars in Black Panther with magic.
imagery.
think
Like I
it's
said,
a
when I
really
first
good
started,
movie. It's like
Yeah.
very visual, and I think the like kind of simplicity of the plot contributes well to it being a movie because they're not going to have to like cut out a million subplots and like all these.
That's true. Yeah.
It being kind of like generic and simple in the plot will help a lot in a movie.
and I felt really like the setting is very cinematic when I was reading this.
Mhm.
That's why it pulled me in so much, the initial first bit. So like I can picture all of this, like her Lion Air when she's going through the city,
Yeah.
when they're being chased. I'm like, this is a friggin' movie
This
that
is like
I
a
want to
video
see
game.
right now. Yeah.
Mhm. And all of the scenes where she and Danan are in their dreamscape, like
Very, yeah.
would just make
Yeah.
beautiful cinema.
Mhm.
Somebody was saying on one of the reviews I read, they're wondering if some of the things in the book that fell a little short were because it was being rushed out. I don't remember if it was ahead of or behind Black Panther.
Not like 2 weeks after Black Panther.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because the timing was marketing genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you could not have timed it better.
It came out
And
in publishing time. I think it came out fairly quickly after she got her deal. I wonder if it was like a year after she got her book deal.
It was like a year and a half.
Was it a year?
Yeah.
oh, that's not bad then.
Because Tommy and I were in the same Pitch Wars class, and so
Oh,
We
right.
are,
That's
like-
cool.
That's
acquaintance friends.
Okay. That's pretty standard then, I think.
I thought it was quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
thought
was
quicker
written
too.
very quickly, and like for a year and a half, the editing had to have been pretty quick because they had the cover out a lot sooner, I think.
Mhm.
And
That's true. And that's, again, very smart marketing. Like for Witches of Ash and Ruin, when they were like, oh, spring 2020, I was like, what? Like, to me, that seems very fast.
Yeah.
But that's about a year and a half as well. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it makes sense. That's pretty standard.
Normal. I thought it was like a year, so I was like, that's really fast.
Yeah, I thought it was less than that. But yeah, so I mean, honestly, maybe it was just like amazing timing with Black Panther coming out because yeah, there were scenes, especially like the like you were saying, the dreamscape reminded me of that, which I don't know if that's a thing in the mythology, maybe, I would guess. So
Mhm.
Something I read in a Goodreads review that I like laughed at because I always think this is so ridiculous when people say it. Is like
quickly mention, if reading the book and you haven't yet, make sure you read the author's note at the end because it's really powerful.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think Erin froze.
I'm skipping
like
in and out.
I don't know.
Oh, everyone's back.
Is everyone frozen?
I don't know.
Everyone's back, I think.
I was talking and then Erin started talking about the author's note, so I don't know if I'm delayed or if she's delayed or what.
I think Erin is delayed. Or
I think I'm delayed.
I think you're
Oh,
good.
we can
I think
hear
you're
you
good
again.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, okay, interrupt me.
Sorry, you guys.
I was like, okay.
No, everyone froze, and I was still talking, and I was so confused. I was like, none of you are moving.
We were all just like, no.
Well, at least we heard what
Okay,
you
never
said,
mind.
like, that came through. So.
Yeah.
What were you saying before I so rudely interrupted you?
That's something I saw in a Goodreads review that like made me like laugh and kind of roll my eyes because I see this come up sometimes in reviews and it's always kind of ridiculous. It was someone who didn't like the romance, which like okay, and they're like basically like made the claim that obviously the romance was added because the publisher made her add romance to it. And I love and people are like, oh yeah, I bet the author was forced to add romance to it.
Obviously, the romance was in there because they are Zutara. Like,
Yeah. Obviously she ships Zutara.
yeah.
But yeah.
And she's like talked about that before.
It's in the author's note, isn't it? Or not the author
I think
note.
it's in the acknowledgments.
Acknowledgements, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, you could maybe make a claim that maybe the publisher like maybe encouraged her to amp up the romance, but like they didn't make her add it and they didn't force her to do anything. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if people like think that publishers can like force you to, like make
Yeah.
your book, no matter how
Yeah,
much
sometimes they very strongly suggest things.
Yeah.
an entire romance subplot. Like I love when people don't like the romance in a book. They're always like, "Oh, I bet the publisher forced them to add this." And like maybe you just don't like.
Maybe they just like romance.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like people who take a star off because there's romance in the book. They're like, "I don't like romance." Take the
Mm.
star
I'm like, then don't read this book,
Don't read YA, period.
right? I can think of very, very few books just in general that don't have some kind of romance. Even if it's a subplot, even if it's mentioned like once,
Mhm.
there's always some kind of something in there.
Hmm.
Especially YA.
Definitely YA. I mean, if you don't like romance, don't read YA. Like, not to say that there aren't YAs without it, but like,
There's definitely
Very
it's
difficult to
rare.
The
find.
majority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like what could you read if you didn't like romance? I'm trying to think, and honestly I can't think of anything. I was like, oh, maybe like true crime, but I'm like, nah, I'm sure there's some marriages in there somewhere. And then you think of like
Cry.
sci-fi, but I'm like, there's plenty of sci-fi books that I know that, I mean, people are still falling in love in the future. And then there's, high fantasy novels, and oh, what do you know? There's a romantic girl there somewhere, and I'm like, I give up. I got
It's
nothing.
totally valid to like not really care for romance in books, but to be like, I'm taking a star off because there was a romantic subplot. It's like nothing to do with the
Really?
quality of the book. Like,
Rude.
Yeah. That's something that's really subjective and is not really like, if you hate that, it's not really fair to take a star off because of it.
Exactly.
it's other thing to say I didn't like the romance in this book versus just no romance.
Yeah. You can't order an onion burger and then get mad that there are onions on it.
That's an excellent point.
I think it was Emma, you were talking about like character motivations a little bit earlier. And that was again with Inan. Like his, I think it's because I wanted so much from him, but his was the only one that I was ever like, really? Was that it felt like he would end up places like very conveniently, particularly at the end where I feel like there could have been really good reasons for him to go here or do this thing, but those weren't the reasons in the book necessarily.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of a specific example, but my head just went totally blank.
I also did not love what's her face? The one he accidentally killed. Spoilers.
Kaya.
Or Kaya.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just didn't love her. And the fact that the king in her, I hated the king too. I just wanted him
He
to
was the
fall.
worst.
Right.
I just wanted him
He
to
was
fall
such
down a hill
hateable
and
villain.
die. Yes.
Just a hill?
Okay. A mountain.
There
A
we go,
giant
better.
mountain.
She's another character that I feel like could have been really interesting because she's like in love with the king and all this stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's just like there's so much in the book that like a lot of things didn't feel like they got as developed as I would have liked.
I liked her.
I like her too. She had
Megan,
potential.
you rebel.
I wanted like more of her. Like I just felt like
Yeah.
she was enough, and so
Yeah, I feel like she.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
She
would
was
love to
there,
see
and I was
her
like, oh,
with
cool, and
Inan
then she was
more.
gone.
Mm-hmm. I feel like she had a lot of potential again, and if it had been stretched over the series rather than shoved all in the one book again.
I would have been really curious to know, because Inan, he's like, this lady is in love with my dad, and he's in love with her, not my mom. Okay. And I would have been like curious to know, like,
You
is
were
this
there.
really Kay? Like, how long have you had to cope with this?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he with your mom and not the commander? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would have wanted more about the relationship between Amari and her parents as well. Like, the dad was so horrible, and the mom was kind of horrible too,
but in a different way.
In a different way, and I wanted like more of an exploration. Like, she killed her dad at the end. Like,
yeah,
Oh,
that was
right, I forgot about
awesome.
another reason Amari is awesome.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, is Anon going to be the main villain for the rest of the series, or like?
That's a good question, because like spoiler, is he dead or not?
It's what?
I said spoiler, is he dead or not? Because it was like
Yeah.
not clear at the end.
Right.
They don't say.
Yeah, he's like stabbed, and then when Zelly wakes up, there's no mention of him. So it's like
Hmm.
he's not mentioned in the synopsis of the book too, which I think is like intentional.
Really?
Interesting.
Oh, I bet we're gonna get a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would
Honestly,
love to see like the mom turn out to be the secret snake. Like you thought the dad was bad, but the mom
yeah.
was terrible.
That would be pretty cool.
I don't remember if it was maybe in Red Queen or something, but the idea of like the woman being the puppet master, and then
Yeah,
once
yeah, it
the
was
king's
in Red
dead,
Queen.
being like, actually, hello, it was me the whole time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the mother has like mind control powers, and she's been the one
Yes.
controlling the king the whole time. Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
maybe
I know the synopsis for Children of Virtue and Vengeance basically says that it's about like Zelly trying to help Amari like take over the throne, basically.
Oh.
Like,
I'm okay. I'm down with that.
she's, like helping her become
Yeah. See, because I was kind of on the fence if I was going to read book 2, because like I said, I almost didn't finish book 1. But if I get more Amari, I'll probably buy it.
if it's like court intrigue and politics, I'm in.
Oh, hell
Yes.
yeah.
High fantasy subgenre, so
If it's just the tale of Amari trying to ascend to the throne, I am so in for that.
Yeah, down.
Yeah.
I found like a note I made in this book about something that bothered me actually. So it's on page 82, so it's early in the book. And Anon is talking to the king, to his father. And his father says, if our kingdom was, he's like talking about like how terrible magic is. And he's like, if our kingdom was ever going to survive, I knew I had to take magic away. And then Anon thinks, what? I jerk forward, unable to trust my own ears. Magic is beyond us. How could father attack an enemy like that? And I was like, does Anon not know that his father destroyed magic?
Yeah.
What does he think happened? Like, how
Not paying attention in his lessons.
I thought that was like really weird. It just never comes up again. And I was like, I feel like that was like a line that should not have been there because it does not make sense.
Like maybe it was a holdover from an earlier draft or something.
Yeah, because I'm like, you were alive when this all happened because Zelly was
11 years is not that. That was something unique compared to a lot of other high fantasy. Was
Yeah,
that
it was like
the
pretty
big tragedy
recent.
happened in the characters' lifetimes.
Mhm.
and not even when they were babies. Like, they were young children.
Recently.
Like
Yeah.
in your memories.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because
Okay.
oh, am I good now? I don't
Yeah,
know
you're
if I'm
fine.
like freezing again. No, I was just saying the fact that Zelly remembers her mother's death and stuff. Like
Mhm.
that was very scarring for her, and probably made up a little bit of her backstory as well.
Mhm.
And who she became very bitter and everything. She's still not my favorite character, but I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the backstory. But within this arc, I wanted her to have more of an arc. But I didn't.
Mhm, definitely.
That reminded me of another thing where I was kind of like interesting was similar to like feeling kind of like Anon went places for slightly arbitrary reasons, like because that was where he needed to be. It felt to me a little bit like the deadlines were kind of just imposed to increase the tension. It was like, and there's this island that comes once every 100 years. So if you don't do it in the next week and a half, magic is gone forever. And
Again,
people know about that island because the king went there, but like no one talked about it. Why wasn't, if the king knew about the island, why wasn't he preparing for it or like something like that?
Maybe it's like that thing in Pirates of the Caribbean where it's, what is it, like you can't find it unless you're lost.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Or it's like you have to be lost. You have to be lost to find a place that can't be found. Elsewise, everyone would know where it was.
Oh yeah, props for memorizing.
Thank you, thank you.
Caribbean.
Closeted Pirate of the Caribbean fan here.
But I thought he oh no, wait, he had the scroll and then he lost it. Okay, yeah. So he would have known about the island and presumably have done something about it. But I feel again like the whole time is running out, the clock is ticking, because like the solstice, blah blah blah, that's the only time you can do the ceremony. Again, like big trope, very common.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah.
I just wanted there to be more reason. Like, it wasn't that I didn't believe that there could be a time constraint, but you didn't give me a good reason why there was one.
Like what happens on this solstice every 100 years that makes it? Because theoretically, every solstice is the same.
The king have waited 11 years and just knocked it all out right at once. Coming back.
Usually it's like the planets are aligning in like a certain way.
Yeah.
I didn't think that when you brought it up, but I'm like, yeah, like what makes this one solstice every 100 years different from all the other solstices all the other years?
Solstice, I don't know.
Solstice.
Solstice.
And like, if they miss this one, magic isn't gone forever, right? Because the island is going to be back in 100 years, so it'll just be
That's
gone
true.
for your lifetime.
I guess there would be nobody to awaken the magic like they did.
I guess because
Yes.
because
Right.
she didn't need to have that tether. Forgot about that. Minor important details.
I feel like they could have found a way to make it work.
Yeah, I was very interested in that, like, plot line, I guess, like how they were talking about, like, this is the will of the gods. But then no one ever was like, was it the will of the gods for all of these magi to be killed? Like, Zelly thinks about the will of the gods all the time, but was never mad at the gods for taking all of that from her.
That's true.
Yeah, I remember thinking about that. Like the whole relationship and discussion of the gods, I felt like was missing like a more negative element, I guess. Like it was all like very positive. Like the gods are great. They're gonna help us get magic back. And I'm like, but they let magic be lost.
Yeah.
It's good.
Do you guys remember weren't there like 4 magi, different types of magi, or
A lot more than 4.
there's a lot more, than 4? Does anyone remember them?
They're all in the book.
Oh God, okay.
7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so my question is, which one would you be?
That's a good question.
Ooh. I want to be the death one.
Of course you do.
I kind of want to be the mind, spirit, and dreams one. It sounds real cool.
Ooh, yes, that's
I want to be the health and disease one.
Why?
That is so much power.
Yeah.
If you're an air magi, can you fly?
Oh man, I hope so. A little rip off if you can't.
Because I'm into that.
I also like that's light. I feel like that probably isn't a very valuable one, but the aesthetic is cool. Like
Do it for the gram.
There's a darkness and light, that would be cool. And then Magi of Annals would be pretty lame. I don't really care about talking to cats or whatever.
What?
So I think I think it would have to be
dogs. I don't need magic for that.
I think it'd be Magi of Air if I could fly. And if not fire, because I'm kind of a pyro, so I do love stuff like that, and I love this in the front of the book. So you can be like, ooh, it's like a Hogwarts house, right? You have to pick which one you're in.
That's a good idea.
I think it's brilliant of writers when they have something like that, so that readers can like see
Get really
themselves.
invested.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah,
Keep track of everything.
exactly.
You kind of mentioned it earlier, but we didn't really talk about it. But the author's note at the end, and I think the general allegory throughout the book regarding modern racism, I thought that was very well done, really powerful. The scene that stood out the most to me was when Zelly is talking to Anon, and she's like, "You can't understand because like this world was made literally for you and not for me." And that was like one of the few scenes, because books don't make me cry super often anymore. But that was like, whoa.
Yeah.
A lot of their discussions about it, like her and Anon, were really good. And like, of course, like the scene like where the guards come to the like secret encampment and like Zoo is like trying to be peaceful and
Mhm.
spoiler alert, they kill her.
Yeah.
Was like obvious. Like that was like probably the most obvious allegorical part of it, but it was
Oh, yeah.
cool. And it was actually like a part that like going back to that whole like Anon like seeing the Magi like kill the guards to rescue Zelly and be like, obviously they're evil and gonna kill everybody. Like right before that, he saw the guards kill
Kill
Zelly,
a literal child.
with their
Mhm.
hands up. You know, so I was like, wait, how can you be on their side? I don't understand.
Child healer with her hands up.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
he totally forgot about that. Like he never brings it up. He never thinks about it afterwards. And I was like,
And I wonder if that's intentional, like an
Yeah,
intentional blind spot.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I just feel like that should have bothered him more. Like I feel like that would have been good character development for it to bother him, even if he did decide to like push it out of his mind and not think about it.
Mhm.
It should have bothered him in some way. To
Like
see
in the
that.
beginning, how he's burning the village and he's like, these people are all dying. And that's a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy of like, oh, they're terrible for killing these guards, and not like think about how terrible it was to kill like an unarmed child. Seemed odd.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would be interested to know what is deliberate by the author and what isn't, because she might have
Mhm.
said like, yeah, he's so he has such a blind spot because he's been raised in such like a privileged and almost brainwashed mindset. If that wouldn't make him look twice, or
Like, I could see that maybe being the case earlier in the book, but like at that point, he's like gotten to know Zelly and gotten to know these people in the camp. And all that. So like seemed like he wouldn't have that blind spot at that point anymore.
right.
Or like when Zelly is yelling at him, having her bring it up. Like, did you not see that? Like,
Mhm.
were you not seeing the same thing that I saw and experienced?
Right.
How
Yeah.
could you not have after everything we've been through together?
Mhm.
I was also wanted more from him when it came to because his dad was basically his abuser, right? Like he
Mhm.
made him hurt his sister, scar his sister permanently. Like they had this messed up relationship, and it drove me nuts when he went back to his father basically and betrayed Zelly, and I was really angry with him. And I think it would have softened the blow if they had showed the psychological impact of why he had been. It's like a Stockholm syndrome almost, right? He's gone back to his abuser, he's fallen back into his old ways, and he should have felt very like sucked back into that, because that's what abusers do. But I didn't pick up on that vibe. Like that wasn't explored.
Believed him turning over Zelly because his father manipulated him, not because he was suddenly afraid of her.
Mhm.
Mhm. Can you guys hear crying baby behind me? I'm hoping.
I think I heard like one small cry.
Okay. Let me know if I should mute myself. He's very angry about being put to bed.
I see.
We've all been there, buddy.
He's excited about Christmas. You can't blame him.
Yeah.
He's only 11 months. He doesn't know Christmas yet. He
Oh, but he will.
won't for a long time. No.
Oh man, baby's first Christmas for a couple of you guys. That's gonna be wild.
Yeah. All he cares about right now is just pulling over the Christmas tree. That's about it.
Yeah.
Get him a small one, then he can just pull it over all the time.
No.
I can love the lights. He just stares at them.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Same with
damage your eyes.
Charlie.
My cousin has a baby that might be the same age as your kid, Erin. I don't remember. But she like posted a picture of her Christmas tree ornaments like in the upper third. Like there's no ornaments.
Yep. Yeah. Well, does he have any comments from anyone?
We managed to go for almost an hour.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
One of our longer book clubs.
Yes, lots to
think
talk
that-
about.
That's all the big ones.
Awesome. Anyone have any final thoughts?
Oh, yes. There was one other thing that I was thinking about that I really loved. And that is that with a book like Children of Blood and Bone, where it's so hyped, there was no doubt in their minds that they were going to get at least a second book.
Yes.
It's a big book deal, but publishing, if it tanked, like they could opt out. But they knew it wasn't going to tank. So she was able to end on a cliffhanger.
Mhm.
And so many first books end resolved enough that like it could get cut off if it didn't sell well. But
Mhm.
it was really refreshing to have such a cliffhanger ending to be like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's true.
The kind of ending I expect to have in like a second book.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, like a first book will end like sort of wrapped up, but still with loose threads, and then like a second book will end with like big cliffhangers before the
Yeah,
third.
and you're like, oh, okay, definitely third book.
But yeah, so it reminded me of the endings of a lot of like second books in series.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's exactly what I was saying, that a lot of the plot points that came so fast for me felt like second book plot points. So that's interesting you would say that.
Yeah, like they got to the temple at first, and I was like, wait, is this not the goal of the book? Is this not
Yeah.
what
A lot of people thought that it would end there.
I'm glad it didn't, because I would have gotten bored.
I think that's a lot of like why I had trouble with the first like half of the book, or like the first like 200 pages or so, is because they were obviously like going to get to the temple fairly quickly, it seemed. Like, I don't know, I didn't really know where the book was going. Like I was like, are they going to get to the temple soon, or is that going to be the end of the book? I don't know, like I didn't really know what the aim was yet and like what the goal was.
Mhm.
And once like, we had a solid goal once they got to Chandomblé or whatever, I was like, okay, now I'm like, I understand what like the point is and what we're trying to do. And so it was like easier for me to get into it at that point.
Mhm.
I need a solid goal in the book I'm reading. So I'm like,
Yes. Yeah.
what's the point?
It was definitely like a little uneven for me in parts. Like I would be like, yes, really stoked, and then it was slower, and then I'd be really hooked again. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens with the pacing in book 2 and if it's going to be different. I suspect it will be better for some reason. Obviously, because book 2 is often stronger for most authors, and also because I feel like maybe she'll have a bit more time, I would think, to work on her edits and that type of thing. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if book 2 is very good. So
Yeah, it comes out. I just looked it up. It comes out on March 5th of next year.
awesome. Yeah, I think it's great to end on a note of like, as much as I had a lot of good and bad things to say, I'm gonna pick up book 2. So that's a solid rating from me, because if I didn't finish it type of thing, DNF'd it on Goodreads or whatever, I would be picking up book 2. So
Yeah, I feel like book 2, like I bought this one. Book 2, I'll probably get from the library and see what I think. And if I love it, then I'll buy that one and the third one.
mhm. I think I'm gonna buy book 2 regardless, because like the cover is gonna be gorgeous again.
Right.
Haven't released the cover yet.
Yeah, they haven't.
Ooh, excite.
I really want to see it.
It's gonna be
I'm-
gorgeous.
All excited, especially after that cliffhanger. Like, I really want to know what happens next.
I'm glad you were such a fangirl, because I felt really bad going into it. I'm like, I know I'm going to be really Simon Cowell-y for this one, so I really hope that Megan really loved
I'm
it.
excited too, because I have been so meh about a lot of the books this year. I've been like, oh, well, that was good, but I was like, is something wrong with me? Do I not like books anymore? But this one, even though like I agree with everything that was said here, basically, I did not care while I was reading it. Like, I was like, oh, this doesn't quite fit. Okay.
Honestly, there are books I had like that. Like, for example, everyone always craps all over Twilight. But with Twilight, I could see. I'm like, there are so many problems with this book. I still sat down and read the 3 books like literally back to back, and did
Yeah, I
not.
still enjoyed it a
I
lot.
barely ate between them, even though I'm like, yeah, there's so many issues with these books, but yeah. All right.
Great chat, right?
Awesome. So I'm sure we'll be having a second chat when book 2 comes out, and fangirling over that one and discussing that one. This is a meaty book, so there's lots to talk about. So great book chat for that one, and for book 2, I'm sure. So thank you guys, everyone who came out and participated tonight. We had lots of you. It's a popular book. It was really fun to do. And we will see you next week. Do we have any idea what our subject is next week yet?
My guess is probably a write-in.
Probably. But we'll see you next Sunday.
We'll tweet about what it is.
Next time. It'll be at the end of our videos. Please subscribe. And thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.